Hey everyone, wanted to talk about my experience going to the One Piece Nationals with Red Purple Kid, the off meta leader of choice. Want to talk about my matchup, show the deck list, talk about Nationals overall, my thoughts, all that stuff. I guess don't want to belabor the point. Like I'm sure you've all heard that Nationals was definitely super messy. There was a lot that went wrong. I don't think it was the fault of the staff. I don't think it was the fault of the folks working the event that day, but obviously a lot of like the planning could have gone a bit better. I like many people came a day early, which meant a whole other day of hotels. We lined up early, pre-registered, got all our stuff, and then despite I would say a majority of the tournament being pre-registered because you got an extra pack for it, they still started the first day like 4 hours late. Repaired a bunch of times and then couldn't get through all 11 rounds, even though we stayed till midnight. And they were very adamant that we're going to get through all 11 rounds. So super messy event. And then the second day was even worse. Like my friends and I waited online for 4 hours to get into the side events. And by the time we got to the front of the line, all the 3v3s were sold out. So we did a bunch of individual events. I was only able to do one. They were able to get into two because the side events didn't have clear start times. You weren't sure when. You had to go back to the back of the line, wait again. And I must have spent like 6-7 hours across the 2 days just standing in lines, which feels really bad when you spend all that money to fly and stay there for days and all this stuff. And yeah, the I guess planning around the event was not great, but the event itself was super fun. Playing with everyone was super fun. The matches I had were great. Hanging out with some of the other players was great. Meeting some of the other content creators was great. And it was just a very cool event with like really cool guests and all that stuff. And all things One Piece were amazing. I just wish I didn't have to stand in a line for as long as I did. That I guess is my one wish. Next year, if I go to nationals, I would like to not have to stand in line for 4 hours every day. That would make me super super happy. I think that's a fair ask. I'm happy to pre-register. I'm happy to do stuff early. I'm happy to stand in line for a bit to get in the venue and stuff like that. I just would like to not stand in line for 4 hours a day every day because that just feels really, really bad when you spend all that money and time to come to, I had to fly cross country. I went from New York. And so it just feels not great. But that's enough about nationals. Overall, I think it was an awesome time. And, I think it was done the best that it could be done with like the issues that arose. Let's talk about Red Purple Kid, how I did right off the bat. I went 6-4, which is not amazing. Definitely better than I thought I was going to do like a day before into the event because I felt very, unconfident going into the event. But, you know, I definitely not as good as I had hoped, but better than I thought I would get, a day or two into the event, basically. 6-4 was, I did not get into top 512. I think I was like 700 something, but 6-4 was the record to bubble up into top 512. About half the people got in. My tiebreakers were bad, so I was in the half that didn't get in. But it is nice knowing that this deck, like, if my tiebreakers were better, like I would have been in top of 512, and that's a cool accomplishment. And so I'm happy with my 6-4 record, especially with an off-meta leader that I don't think anyone was prepared to see. They don't release like every single deck that was played, but I'm pretty sure I was the only person on this deck in the whole venue. And a lot of really cool comments from my opponents and the people next to me saw the leader. They're like, "That's awesome! Like, I hope you do great." And it was really nice to take a risk and play a leader that had a lot of support and love behind it, but just people weren't going to commit such a huge opportunity to this leader, and I'm happy I did. I have no regrets about that. So we got Red Purple Kid, star of the show. We got all of our Straw Hat Dawn. That is that is what gives us good luck. You always want to bring your best Dawn to an event. Doesn't have to be most expensive Dawn, just your favorite Dawn, because that will bring you good luck. I'm a firm believer that the Dawn is key to getting you those wins. And so starting right off the bat, we got 4 Namis. And apologies if I'm a little rambly. This is like my 4th time recording this video. Kept having issues. And so I hope 4th time's the charm. Let me move these over a little bit. But we got our 4 Namis. This is a Straw Hat deck. I counted earlier. I have 28 hits in this deck for Nami. It should almost never whiff. It unfortunately whiffed twice for me in some key matches, and those matches both resulted in losses. So that is super unfortunate. But we have 28 hits for Nami in this deck, and she searches 5. So I feel really, really good with those ratios. I think I just got very unlucky in some of my matches, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And I guess, like, to preface up front, like, I do not think I'm a great player. I think I have a lot to learn still about One Piece and just card games and being a good player. And so when I say this, I don't want to make excuses for myself, but I went 6-4. I do really believe that the deck had a 7-3, maybe even an 8-2 day in it, because some of the hands that I got and like some of the draws that I got in some key losses were really just horrendously bad to a kind of crazy degree. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I do think like a better player would have been able to dig their way out of it potentially, but it was just a really really tough spot that shouldn't really happen based on like how the deck is built. I think it was built better than it performed in a couple of matches just because I got really weird lack of 2Ks and stuff like that. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that. But overall, like Nami, 28 hits, super solid choice for consistency. Can find you 2Ks, can find you your rush cards, can find you events. Really great card. Amazing 4 of. MVP of the Sakazuki matchup, to be honest, like Nico Robin. You'll kind of see that Zoro's run this run this as well at 2 usually. I think 2 is like the great number because she's so searchable. But it's just so great to be able to remove Rebecca for 1 Dawn, to be able to remove Mansherry before they get any value out of it. If I'm playing against Sakazuki, I will always try to find this card. If I see it, I take it. If it's not in my opening hand, I'll probably mulligan unless the hand is amazing. Besides this, like it's just so good. Without it, they get so much value out of those Rebeccas. And so you really, really want to see this card as much as possible in that matchup. And it's also good against yellow. As we saw, Jonas, who got first place, runs 3 Sanjis, 3 Brûlés. And so if you're going to, those Brûlés come off trigger, Nico Robbins is like a really cheap and quick answer to those Brûlés. So amazing card. I think 2 is the right number. Could maybe go to 3, but 2 feels good because outside of like those scenarios, this card is just a 1K counter. Can't really do much with it. But speaking of our 2K counters, we got a couple here. So our first 4 are Otama. Pairs really well with Nico Robin as well as Jet Pistol, which I'll show off a little bit later. But a really nice 2K and also just a good way to prevent Sakazuki or Purple Luffy from getting too much value from their blockers. You can reduce the cost of them, and then blocking with that character becomes kind of dangerous, which is a really nice way to force them to take life, especially if you're setting up some of our unblockables, which you'll see later in the deck list. Not searchable by Nami, which is the one downside of that 2K. But then we got this guy right here, Sanji, who is the MVP of the deck, or the MVP of the early game of this deck, I should say. I did not see him in my opening hand as much as possible, as much as I wanted to, maybe like 1 or 2 games. But when you see him, it's so amazing because you can play him, and then you can swing 7K. You can get yourself closer to that 3 life threshold so that you're no longer a 4K leader. And if you pair him with a rush card, you can potentially swing 6K, 7K, 7K in 1 turn with 5 Dawn, because you'll be able to use your leader effect to plus 2K on your leader. So he's a 7, a Zoro could be a 7, and then your leader could be a 7. And that's like insane value for your 5 Dawn turn. And not a lot of decks could deal with that super well. I think if you're playing anyone but Enel, that's just so good. Really good against Sakazuki, and an amazing card. Keep it at 4, never touch it. And then the last 2Ks are for Frankie or Franosuke. He is like a nice last minute resort against Sakazuki when you just need to get 2 hits in. He can rush if you put a Dawn under him and you have 8 or more Dawn. So at 8 Dawn, you can swing for 7K with Franosuke and then swing 7K with leader if you use your leader effect. And that's just nice against Sakazuki when they're so close to being at no life and you want to get an unblockable hit in. Just putting pressure on them with 2 7K swings is really important when they have a lot of blockers up. And then we got Heat at 4 of. So now we're kind of getting into our attackers. Heat is amazing, very cheap to play, but is essentially always a 6K because of your leader ability. I think my kind of major qualm with him is just how removable he is in this meta. So Gadatsu gets him really easy. Yamato gets him really easy. Sakazuki gets him really easy. And so he's not searchable. He's easily removed. That's kind of what I don't like about him right now. And so I think if I thought about what this list might look like in OPO5, if I built it a little differently, maybe he goes because maybe there's a better 3 cost in this slot or 3 cost card in this slot. It's tough because it's so powerful to have him on board. He just doesn't stick as much as I would like, which is a bit of a shame. But also Purple Luffy can remove him so easily with Poly. So you definitely want something at this threshold. You can't have a deck that's all top end, so you need something that costs 3. And I think the nature of just the meta right now is that 3 costs are easy to remove. But maybe there's a better 3 cost than Heat that could help this deck out. For now, he's staying, though. He's a really great card. If he sticks, it's just insane value. Pairs so well with the other cards in the deck. Um, and then similarly, we got Monkey D. Luffy, searchable by Nami, costs 4, so a little harder for yellow to kill him, a little harder for Sakazuki to kill him, just has to invest like a Great Eruption or something. And 6k on defense and offense all the time. I think vanillas are just generically still really good. There's always value in just playing a body with a good stat line and having a card that has counter in it. So this is just a good card. Was really happy with this card's kind of performance in my matches against yellow, and worked really well against Sakazuki as well. Now, into the cards that really make this deck shine, especially against Sakazuki, you got your Rush Zoro at 4. A lot of the time, you're just playing this card and swinging 7k with him and then 7k with leader and just putting pressure on Sakazuki as much as possible. Like that's such a huge part of that matchup. Just beating them down as much as you can and seeing Zoro as much as you can is important in doing that. Pairs really well with like Nico Robin, so they can get rid of the blockers that are giving them free value and then just go straight for face, force them to discard cards, force them to take life. Really great card. You want to see 4 of them. Then we got 2 of the Rush Luffy's. Just a closer, if you get Sakazuki to 0, you can just go unblockable with Luffy, everything you have, and hope you got it. Great against like yellow if they get a bunch of blockers off life. This is a great closer. So amazing card. Good at 2. You could search for it. You see it enough. I rarely was like, oh man, I need Luffy more than anything, and then not see him. You kind of over time will learn which matches it's important to have him, and so I saw him almost every game. So good card, great to have. Very happy with it. And then next, get into just the overall MVP. I'll give this 2 joint titles. So there's 2 MVPs of this deck. And they're both very similar. It's the 5-cost blocker Kid and the 5-cost Queen. Like these are just the overall. We got our early game MVP, we got our MVP against Sakazuki, and we got our overall MVPs. These cards are so good. Kid, I think, just very obvious. Makes so much sense in this deck. You Don -1 with your leader, you get a Don back with Kid. So you just swung 7k, and now you have a Don that you can put under something else or spend to play another character. It's just amazing. Like it works so well. It lets you use your ability every turn for free. And it's a blocker with a 6k stat line, which is huge against yellow. It's really, really, really good. Queen is also huge against yellow, blocker with a 6k stat line, but lets you draw more cards. And so when you're trying to starve out an L, but not starve yourself out in the process, this card keeps you afloat. It helps you continue to play blocker or bodies on the board and continue to get cards to counter out so that you don't have to go to 0 life so quickly. And gets you to a position where you can just go for game in one big turn. Queen is so good. Kid is so good. If I could play these cards at higher costs or at a higher number than 4, I absolutely would. They're amazing in this deck. And then to close out our characters, we have our 9-drop Kaidos. I would kind of consider Kaido and Luffy as like one unit. So we got 4 finisher cards. You don't always want to see Kaido. It's kind of iffy against Sakazuki sometimes because so many of his cards can't be KO'd. It's good against Danelle and Katakuri. Good against Purple Luffy. So in those matchups, it's really nice to see him. But if you don't see him, it's not the end of the world. You have other cards that kind of fill that role. And so between the 2 of these cards, between the 4 of these cards, you'll see one of them at least once in your match. And you can kind of decide based on that how you want to play out those finishing turns. Moving on to the events, we got 2 Jet Pistols. Amazing off life. Pair super well with Otama to take out Borsellino, Big Bomb, Katakuri, the 7-drop Borsellino. So really, really nice. Really good punishment against Lucci and Gadatsu. They spend a turn building that, or playing the character, remove a body. You can counter remove with the Jet Pistol and then play another character or swing at life or something like that. So like really nice card. Perfect deck too. You don't want it to clog your hand, but you do want to see it occasionally, and you do want to be able to search for it, which is what Nami's for. Really, really happy with this card at 2. And then another card at 2 is Jet Gatling, just a nice counter card that they don't always expect. 0 cost, can turn your 1k into a 3k, can get rid of your bricks and turn them into a 3k. And yeah, just a nice card, really good effect. You can ramp early if you see it in your life, which is the difference of playing like a Luffy or playing a Kid blocker, which is a very big difference. And so yeah, it's a super great card. If you see it in your life, you almost always want to ramp, and it can really win your games because they don't always account for it. They don't expect you to have it. And then lastly, we got our Radical Beams. This deck goes down to 2 life pretty quickly because you want to be at 3 to get full value of your leader power. and a lot of times you have like a hanging Don because you use leader ability. You have one Don left because of Kid Blocker, and you don't know what to do with it because you don't have Nami in hand. You don't need to play Nico Robin, and so having one up for Rad Beam is like really easy because of that effect. And apologies for the glare here, but hopefully you guys can see everything and the voiceover helps. But yeah, Rad Beam's amazing, really great against yellow because you can kind of survive a couple of turns without having to use up your blockers, and then you could use your blockers to go for game because they do have that 6k stat line. So yeah, this is the deck. It went 6-4. In terms of the matchups that I saw, I'll try to go through them as best I can. It's been a couple days, but I'm recording this Tuesday evening. The matches were all on Saturday, so it's been a bit, but I remember most of them. And right off the bat, I did not see Purple Luffy once, which I'm really happy about because it's a very high rolly deck. If they see their curve, this deck struggles because they just remove everything on curve and they continue to ramp, and then you're in a bad spot. So I somehow dodged Purple Luffy. I also didn't see as much Sakazuki. So if you look at kind of the breakdown of the leaders, Sakazuki was like 50% of the tournament, but I saw mostly Anels and Katakuris. And I think that's kind of why my performance was a bit of a mixed bag. I did a bit better into the Sakazuki that I saw, a bit worse into the yellow leaders. And so that's kind of how I ended up at 6-4. But my first match was against Katakuri. I think it was a pretty close game, but they got a little aggressive too early. They swung out. They used the Thunderbolt to remove a blocker. And because of these bad boys, I was safe. I was able to counter out pretty effectively. And then I just went for game the next turn. And that was that. Second game was against the Sakazuki. And again, like, I am not a good player. I think there are things I could have done differently. I think this deck isn't perfect. I think a better player can win some of the matches that I've lost. I do also think that against that Sakazuki, I got high rolled a little bit. He saw 3 Luccis. He played Rebecca, got one of them back for a 4th Lucci. And so that's just a lot of removal to deal with. It doesn't always happen. And despite all that, I got down to 1 life. So if I recall correctly, I was poised to win in the next turn because I had rush cards in my hand. I just ran out of resources first and lost the game. I followed up with that Sakazuki after the match, after the tournament, and I saw that he ended 3-7. So I don't know that I necessarily like lost because of the deck having such a huge advantage over me. I think I just got a bit unlucky in that matchup, but that is also just a bad matchup for me. So that was my one Sakazuki loss of the day. My next match was against a Whitebeard, which Whitebeard and Red Purple Luffy are really, really favored for this leader. Because whereas other leaders have to decide, do I play a character this turn or do I swing 6k? Kid can always do both for the most part. So I'm able to establish board and able to pressure leader. And so it's just really, really easy. And then you got your defensive cards so that when they're ready to go for game, you're safe for the most part. And I think you should be winning those matches like 70-80% of the time. It's really rare to lose against those leaders as Red Purple Kid. It can happen because they're still such powerful leaders with so many cards kind of at their disposal. But we have a good time against those leaders for the most part. Our next match was Red Green Law, and this one kind of ruined my whole day, to be honest. I have 12 2Ks here. I have a searcher that can find 8 of them and has 28 hits in the deck overall, not including Nami. There's 28 other Straw Hats here. I was playing against Red Green Law, of all things, which is already very uncommon. It's not commonly played in OPO5. And I had a mulligan in my hand, and my Nami whiffed. I had a Nami, it whiffed, which is already, okay, not great. I think it saw 3 other Namis and 2 queens, and I got nothing. And then the match kept progressing, and I wasn't seeing any 2Ks. I went through the entire match, my opening hand, all 5 life, a couple of draws, I think 4 or 5 draws, I think even a queen, and I saw no 2Ks that entire time. I saw Rad Beams, but 0 2Ks, which if you've played against Red Green Law, being able to counter out of those 7K swings is really, really, really important. And so not having any 2Ks was really painful. That match was incredibly one-sided, and it was a match that I think is pretty favored for this deck. I can swing pretty effectively. I can play Kaido to remove some of their bodies. I have Nico Robin for some of their chump blockers. I have the tools to deal with Jet Pistol. I was able to Jet Pistol a Law Blocker. I have the tools to deal with that deck, but I just lost so quickly because I had to take every single hit for the most part. And yeah, that's really rough. So I think that loss felt bad. I didn't feel like I had anything that I could do to prevent it. And I think it kind of mentally messed with me for a big part of the day because it happened a second time against the Katakuri later in the tournament. So my next match was against Nell. Not so much to say about that one. I won, I think, against Nell. You just got to hope that they don't see Gedatsu on curve, or you got to hope that they choose not to keep you at 5 life. If they can get you down to 4 life, you're able to play your 5 cost characters safely against Gedatsu, and like that's kind of the big part of it. And then you just starve them out, go for board, wait till they don't have that many resources, and then when you have as many swings as possible, you just go for game. And that's what I did. It was good. It was fine, and I won that match against Nell. If I'm recalling correctly, my next match might have been against the Katakuri, and I lost that match. Um, I won the dice roll, and it was just rough. Like they got Gedatsu on curve. I think they kept me at 5 life, and so the Gedatsu popped something important. They played Thunderbolt to kill a queen, and so it was very one-sided. They were kind of pulling. They pulled, I believe, some characters off of life. So I think they got a Paraspero, Satori, and they were just removing everything with on-play effects like Gedatsu and Thunderbolt. And so I just didn't have a wide board. I wasn't able to put in that many attacks per turn. And so even though he wasn't on his second curve, he was just being so aggressive. And then I also wasn't seeing a lot of 2Ks. I remember in that matchup, I saw all 4 of my Zoros and a Luffy, and maybe 1 2K. And that's just not what you want to see against Katakuri when you're trying to counter out of swings to survive a couple more turns and get more bodies on board. So that match also very one-sided. A lot of my characters got removed, and I just wasn't able to put any pressure on the board to make him get down to 0 life. I think he was at like 1 or 2 by the time the game was over, and it was just like kind of done. So a really, really unfortunate match there. At this point, I think I'm like 3-3, and so I kind of go back and forth, win 1, lose 1. I beat another Renell at some point. I lost to another Renell at some point. I beat a Sakazuki. I beat 2 Sakazukis. Yeah, so I think overall, to finish the day, I was 2 for 3 against Sakazukis. I was 0 for 1 against the Red Green Law. I was 1 for 1 against the Whitebeard, which was 5 matches, and then I think I was 3 for 5 out of 3 for 5 against the Yellow Leader. So I lost to 1 Katakuri and 1 Nl. And if my math is right, that should put me at 6 wins. Yep. So 3 wins against Yellow, 2 wins against Sakazuki, 1 win against Whitebeard. And so my losses were Sakazuki, Red Green Law, Katakuri, and Nl. So Yellow, I didn't have as good a day as I thought I would. It was just kind of a mixed bag. Sakazuki had a slightly better day than I thought I would. And then there was just some kind of offhand leaders that were a mixed bag as well. I think Red Green Law is favorable. I just got so unlucky with not seeing any 2Ks in that matchup where it really, really mattered. Anyways, that was my day. Obviously, I think there were things I could have done better, but it did feel like, based on kind of how some of those matches went, there was 1 or 2 that I could have really won if I just had a more playable hand. And so when I say that, I think this deck had a 7-3 or an 8-2 in it. I don't think I'm that far off base. Obviously, the more you win, the better the players you're playing. And so if I enter that kind of pool of X1, X2 folks who were vying for that top 64, it's very possible that excuse me, it's very possible that I just got my ass handed to me. But kind of knowing how this deck works, I feel like I have a good matchup into Zoro, which was really prevalent in as you got into like upper plays, and I was doing good to Sakazuki, and I know how to play against Katakuri and Arnell, and so I do think that under slightly better circumstances, I could have gotten a little further, maybe 7-3, but really, really happy with my 6-4. I could have been top 5-12 with better tiebreakers, and I think that's good enough for me, knowing that I took an off-meta leader that I'm sure literally no one played in that entire venue, and I was able to go with a positive record and play against some of the best best players in the country and do well. And so I'm happy with that record. I had a lot of fun. I played some really great matches. Everyone was super excited when they saw the leader. They were like, I'm sure my opponents were excited because they were like, oh, this is gonna be a free win. But the people next to me were like, oh man, I love this leader. It's gonna be sick. And whenever my match was over, they're like, who got it? They were all really happy when I was able to take some wins. And so it was really cool. I was really happy with it. I think my goals for next year is to try some more meta decks at these competitive events, and ideally do what I can to go into top 16 with everything that I have. I'd really like to kind of, get a top cut win at some point, whether it's at a Treasure Cup or regionals or something even better. But I'm hoping to go to nationals again next year, and I'm hoping to go with a 2-round bye. And I think once I get some more wins under my belt, I can kind of be a little bit more creative with the leaders and my deck lists at these big events. But that's not going to stop me from putting out content on leaders like this, and taking these guys to locals and having fun with the game, because I think I have the most fun when I build decks that I like, and decks that are coming from kind of my thoughts and my ideas, and not really just a copy paste from a winning list. I don't always have great success with just copying winning lists and not really understanding the intention behind them. And building these decks from scratch, I think, has taught me a lot about the game and what works and what doesn't, and how to like work against the meta. So overall, had a great time. Waited in line for lots of hours. My feet hurt, my legs hurt, but I met some great people, made some good friends, connected with some guys from New York that I kind of only talked to in passing in our locals, and was able to spend a lot more time with them, which was awesome. Saw some other content creators, saw Eggman, saw Lofi TCG. So that was cool to meet those guys in person. And yeah, it was a great time, despite a lot of the shenanigans that went on. Excited to kind of go back next year. Thank you guys. Really hope you enjoyed hearing about this deck. I'm sorry I couldn't come back with an 8-2 record and get this guy into top 64. But hopefully hopefully enjoyed it. Hopefully you get some good stuff from this. And really appreciate everyone who engages with me and gives me kind words. It means a lot, and it always makes me super happy to kind of see folks who use the list and do well with it, or like win at a locals. Someone told me they took it to a regionals and in their region and did well with it. So that's super awesome. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you would have run anything differently. Let me know what you're thinking for OPO6. I'm going to experiment with different leaders in OPO6. I got my eyes on Moria. I want to see if Arlong comes back a little bit in OPO6. We'll see. Maybe Red Purple Kid. I don't know. But yeah, had a great time. Appreciate it. And I hope you guys will catch me in the next one.